Everyone, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. We are a weekly podcast dedicated to sincere, in-depth investigations into the paranormal, supernatural, and the metaphysical, with a special focus on the UFO topic. We take a sincere, analytical approach, thoroughly evaluating each case and its implications. Our discussions go beyond the surface as we engage with researchers, investigators, and experiencers to explore the deeper layers of their testimonies. We strive for high-resolution analysis, carefully examining evidence, patterns, and perspectives that challenge conventional thinking. If you're looking for a podcast that seeks deeper understanding, you're in the right place. Please be sure to like and subscribe and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. Thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.
Okay, everyone, welcome to Paranormally Beyond Disclosure. We're going to do a very unconventional one tonight. Todd is not with us, so I'm going to be leading it as the main host, and we brought on a past guest, Kathleen Tedder, abductee, as our guest co-host for tonight. And tonight we have on Richard Smith. And Richard, I don't even have your bio in front of me. Todd has your bio, and I didn't think that I was going to be doing the intro, and I don't even have your bio in front of me. So why don't you give us your bio, short, quick bio yourself, and then we'll quickly jump into your experiences, and whichever is the most logical, perhaps maybe the one where you're 21 years old, I think, that kind of kicked everything off and brought to awareness, your whole lifelong experiences.
Sure. It's thank you for asking too. That is pretty much a good place to start, because that experience at 21 was a ripple effect backwards to when I was 4 years old, and then forwards to what I would be doing. In that, I call it my first awakening. In that initial experience, I had turned 21, and at that point, an entity I refer to as the crone, I write about her in the books, I describe her as a female praying mantis, covered in a dark brown cloak with a hood over her head. You can see her hands, her face. But the first time she made herself known, it was a shock. But I think the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "I know you, but how do I know you?" Because that was a shock. Like, I'm not supposed to be familiar with something like this.
Mm-hmm. That you didn't even think was real. Yeah. Can you give us the full experience of the first time that you laid eyes on this entity?
Oh yeah. It was her presence in the room. It felt like you could cut the air with a knife. There was an electricity in the air in that initial experience, and she just decided to make herself known right in the bedroom there.
And is this when you were younger, or is this when you were 21? Just to be clear,
21. Yeah,
this is the 21 year, and you're in bed at night. You're awake.
This was in broad daylight.
Oh, this was in broad daylight. Okay.
During the daytime, yeah. So it didn't even have to be, even though most experiences do tend to be at night. This was right in the middle of the day. late morning, early afternoon, maybe somewhere around there. And her appearance was initially quite startling or shocking, even though there was a familiarity there. And as that initial time went on, it began what I refer to as the conversation from that point on. But she has a look to her. I would say it's like Naples yellow skin to alabaster.
Naples yellow.
Yeah.
What kind of yellow is that? Is that like a
Uh,
brownish yellow or a greenish yellow? Or
it's probably more on the tan side, but more so yellow. It's a lot lighter than mustard yellow. That's the best way I can describe it. And she towered over me, and there have been times where she seems to be anywhere from 9 to 12 feet tall, and she had a much larger head, and I could tell from what I could see, with the cloak, that she had a much thinner body, and she had
much thinner than what the cloak gave the impression of.
Yeah, right. Because as time went on, there were later experiences where I would actually see a full body of her. Those were few and far between, because most of the time, since the cloak seemed to have a life of its own, it looked like, even though I would say she was walking, it looked like she was just gliding across the floor.
And that's what you mean by the cloak had a life of its own.
Yeah.
Okay, because the cloak seemed to be.
So it gave the impression.
Mm-hmm.
And at that, she had, I describe her eyes as large. It wasn't just dark or black. It was like obsidian rainbow. So it was dark, but there was a shimmer in the eyes against the light.
Like oil, maybe? Like
something
oil
similar to that. Yeah, you could liken it to that. If you look across oil, you see that rainbow effect in it.
Right. And eyes like taking up a third or 2/3 of the head. That's what's commonly said about manted eyes, is that they're taking up a large percentage of the head.
Yes. But she had that overall look of being a oversized praying mantis, but in hominid form, standing on two legs, hands. Okay. The hands themselves would have, three digits on the hand, and then it's what looked like might have been a thumb. Okay.
Like an opposable appendage of some kind.
Yeah. Something to that effect. But they definitely had a insect-like look to them, but nothing that seemed dangerous. That was the other thing too about the presence of that first meeting. There was nothing invasive about it. It didn't feel, even though I had to get used to it for the first time, that I was aware of it. There was never anything, how would you say, threatening or abusive or anything like that. So,
may I ask a question, Richard? Were you paralyzed or frozen in any way when these experiences happened? Because I never experienced paralysis, but many have, and I was just curious if that's what happened with you.
I just think it was my own shock. That was it. No, not actual paralysis.
In and of itself. I think you can be in a state of fear that's so intense that your muscles completely lock up.
When you're coming in contact with an entity like that for the first time of your awareness, I mentioned earlier, there's something different to the atmosphere too, and that kind of knocks you off kilter too, because it's like, okay, I'm in the bedroom, but this doesn't feel like the way it should. This doesn't feel like the bedroom, but it is. So
go into a little bit more on that. Is there anything else you can say about? Do you think that, because I will just insert this real quickly here, because I'm under the suspicion that that potentially in many abduction cases, the abductee is, whether they realize it or not, kind of moved out of the frequency where we're normally situated at in reality, in the universe. And there's potentially a kind of nearby parallel kind of plane that where you can still observe, all of the physical reality and things in it, but it's not quite, on the dial of physical reality. Do you think that that's potentially what it could have been? Or go in, if you can, and describe a little bit further why everything seemed different? Not just because the entity is there. You're saying the environment somehow seemed distinctly different.
I can answer that, but by going backwards a little bit. In that first awakening, it was a cluster bomb of memories that came back, things you would just pass off as a kid or a teenager as dreams. Okay.
Instantly?
Instantly. They all keep flooding back like memories. And then, because she's still looking at me, waiting for me to realize who she is. And then I realized, oh, that's who you are. You're the one, that obscure entity that was in the backdrop of my experiences as a kid. And, when you're growing up, you have that sense something was there, but I couldn't see it, like out of the corner of your eye or something in back of you. And then you turn around and it's gone. There was always this obscure entity in the experiences, like watching over, which is why when I initially started writing about these things, I had also referred to her as mother. But, most of the time I just call her the crone, because that's what, that's accurate. And most people.
Is that what she told you, or where did the crone name come from?
That was really from her relationship with a group I describe in the book as the Sisterhood. And she's known as the crone by many of them.
Within that group. Okay.
Yeah. So I get into that kind of, I guess you could call it a social structure in the book for the Sisterhood. But going back to your other question, though, once those memories flooded back, I was, one of them, I looked at her, because then the question was, well, how did you get, I'm looking around, how did you get in here? And one of those memories that came to light was seeing her come through a portal when I was younger. So I just assumed, okay, that's the way she did it. Not that I always saw it that way, because a lot of times she would just appear. But I have witnessed that too on rare occasions, like which is akin to witnessing her full body, which is rare, but I did see it. That was the only way I knew that she was actually walking under that robe. So, but she has a very intense look about her when she's staring right at you. But in that stare was a sense of, I guess you'd call it compassion, as a teacher. And in my family, it turned out, my brother and I had been involved with it since we were kids. So, which ties in with the whole family bloodline thing. Some people will ask, why would they pick certain families? Well, if you're looking to see how the human experiment on this planet is going to pan out, you're going to do what any interested scientist is going to do. You're going to have a control group and an experimental group. And the experimental group, you're going to follow those bloodlines all the way down from primordial times, which gets to a whole other set of implications that we can talk about later, if you want.
Because, and just to follow up on what you just said there, so does that sort of add like a control to the experiment, because you're dealing with the same genetic group, and and that kind of helps kind of narrow, I don't know, the possibility or something, or why
Yeah, I think
necessarily.
so. I mean, I wouldn't be able to nail it down exactly, because when you start looking at the history of the human race, there's so much mixture going on there that it raises the question, okay, why are they following certain family bloodlines? My best answer is the one I gave before, but within the experimental bloodlines that they're following,
Right, they marry into other
yeah,
bloodlines, and then they still follow
yeah,
them. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
I think they're looking for whether or not we can evolve past where we are, not just biologically, but psychospiritually too, in conjunction with our biology, and therefore the full experience of what it means to be human. It's in those conversations with the crone, she would tell me, well, your race has two choices. You either become a bunch of misanthropes, or you evolve into something that is a caretaker of the planet. So, and I think we see that struggle happening today with the advent of the raised awareness of indigos and people who are autistic. We see those challenges coming about with the awareness of the whole identity issue, which is challenged by the transgender community. But the idea being is that if we're having a problem with that, how are we going to deal with what's out there? What if you come across a Louis Gossett Jr. type character from Enemy Mine, where he's asexual, male and female? He can give birth to his own kind right within himself. How are we going to address that? Okay, so these are the challenges that we have facing us, and indigos have a how would you say it, a heightened sensitivity to what's going on around them. Autistic people have a much different way of seeing things and understanding things. So you start watching that and you start realizing, oh, okay, these are the people who are going to bring us into official first contact, because they're going to be the ones that have the ability to actually do the communication in a way that the average person would have a hard time with, because
it would seem that they may be telepathically adept, given what we're learning now, in light of the recent telepathy tapes, revelations.
I was also told by the ETs that they want us to learn. They want us to practice telepathy because they are communicating with many. And I have that gift. I've been blessed. I can talk with trees, Sasquatch, ET, whatever. So I have that blessing, and I would love to see more people work with that.
A lot of the communication with the crone was telepathic in my head. Like sometimes it would just be the idea transfer. Other times I would hear her voice in my head. But she would make it sound like English, and I knew very well, okay, you're not speaking in English, you're just doing it for me. But, other times it would just be the idea of how a cuneiform or a hieroglyphic, or, it's one symbol, but it conveys a number of ideas at once, depending on the context. That would be thoughts and ideas at time between her and I. She would just put an image in my head and be like, there's your answer. I don't need to say anything else. So that was rather interesting, getting used to that too, and just having that voice in my head.
Can you give us an example? And if we can we take it back to that first initial experience? Was there any moments in that first initial experience where she conveyed something imagistically, And yeah, can you give us an example?
I suppose the best answer to that would be where and why I started out as an artist initially. Because in that initial meeting between her and I, she knew that I was about to go back to college for visual arts. I had just finished commercial art. I wanted to switch over to visual arts because all my teachers in college had said all the great original ideas for advertising, art, and design come from the fine arts. I was like, okay, I wanted to see that side of it. So I went back to school for that. She comes about right at that time, knowing full well what I'm doing. So that visual arts program, that college setting, became, I guess I call it like an incubator for me at that point, because in that initial dialogue that started with her, she asked me, would you use your talents and skills to take this downloaded information and turn it into something that communicates with the masses about this phenomena? I said, yeah, let's go for it. And so visual imagery, those are examples, because then I had to take it and figure it out and get it onto canvas or put it into a mixed media sculpture or something to that effect, or even ultimately going as far as conveying an idea that turned into a large installation piece towards the end of my stay there at college.
Was she conveying images to you, which you were then transcribing into art? Or
sometimes it would be images, sometimes it would be just concepts, thoughts, and then I go run with it. Yeah, because a lot of it was geared towards. I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody else who is doing quote unquote alien art, but she wanted me to go in the direction of politics, sociology, subject matter of current affairs.
She, the crone, wanted you to?
Crone, right. Okay. And show ultimately the golden thread that went through all of it was to show how the mundane and the profane exist on the same plane of reality. If you want a more concrete example, it would be like, why does your paycheck and a UFO exist on the same plane of reality? Where's the connection there? And then you go from there with that thought. And that could be one painting, or that could be a whole entire series that explodes. So there was that golden thread running through it. Of course, I often joke about this now, but the other aspect of going to that particular college is that curriculum was run by well-established professors who were international artists in their own right. So you have that very well-trained intellectual aspect that I had to go to in front of all of them and explain that this is what I wanted to devote the tutorials and everything all the way through for the next 2.5 to 3 years. And you could have heard a pin drop because it went over like a lead brick. But one of my teachers who became, we each had mentors during those years we were there, going through each segment of work that we did. He says, I'll let you do this, but he says, I don't want to see, he says, I do not want to see any airy-fairy garbage in this stuff. He says, it better be down to earth and real and concrete. He says, I understand where you're going to go with this, and I'm right there with you. And so, because he himself was a very socially and politically motivated artist with the stuff that he did. So he could see through the craziness of it and get to the core root of what I wanted to do. He never believed anything about the subject matter or anything I talked about, but he backed me up 110% to the point where there was one particular piece that raised a whole lot of controversy with the professors there. And that's, people can see this on the site in the gallery. It's the one called The Coming. And it basically depicts what I would refer to as an extraterrestrial progenitor above a fiery earth, and descending from its hands are a bunch of different major religious symbols. So, of course, that, set some people off the wrong way. And my professor stood up for me. He says, look, these are his experiences. This is what he's conveying. You don't have to believe him if you don't want to, but you also can't take away the fact that he has the right to do this, and what he's experiencing is exactly what he's putting on the canvas. So, because he wasn't about to let them censor it like that. So I got to proceed and finish talking about the artwork and explain where I was coming from. But it was just from experience, from talking with the crone, from learning from the members of the sisterhood, that this is a bona fide fact. And I think the whole ancient alien things has panned out backing me up on that all of our religious beliefs come from ancient astronauts who got stuck on this planet. And unfortunately, for people who misinterpreted a whole lot of things, the politics of it became camouflaged with the telephone game over time, Hitler's big lie theory over time. Eventually that warps into religion, which the core root of it was the politics, and the politics was used to camouflage the truth of this kind of contact. So this is how things evolve along the way in a very distorted way. And I was just showing people, look, this is where it's coming from. Whether you like it or not, this is going to be the realization. And now here we are in the 21st century, all these years later, after I had done that series, and the congressional UAP hearings, they're panning out to proving this out. You have extraterrestrial beings that, just to pick a number out of the air, can live for 100,000 years at a clip with no real cell degradation whatsoever, like our aging process here. So if you're dealing with beings that can live for quite a long time, and we base things on 10-year cycles of decades, or 20-year cycles for a generation, or 50-year cycles, or 100 years, and you have entities that are 100,000 years. Well,
right.
Doesn't it stand to reason that the ancient aliens that were here in the past are the ones we're going to meet in official first contact, the same ones? That's the shocker right there, because when we come face to face with that official first contact, we may very well be coming face to face with the one that actually created our bloodline in the first place eons ago.
Right. I think that's something that we kind of forget about and fail to maybe take into consideration when we're thinking about, what's going on currently. These ETs might be playing really, really long range plans. They're playing out something that's, who knows, how long these agendas span, and what stage of this. I think we all kind of like have the sense, that we're right at the final culmination, of something, and that maybe, this is kind of near the end of, whatever agenda, has been playing out. But to me, it's not obvious, that that's necessarily the case. It probably isn't, just given, the the span of time that they're operating on. Getting back to the experiences that you went through. So when the when the crone first came to you, let's say when you were 4 years old. Let's go to the early experiences.
Mm-hmm.
What was she conveying then, and what was going on then? At that point, I suppose she probably wasn't introducing the mission that you just talked about, as far as,
No,
conveying her concepts and ideas into art, and then, disseminating them out into the public. What was going on at that point? And with your brother as well, being that, your brother is also being taken, and perhaps other members of your family. What was happening with those early experiences? What was the nature of those experiences?
at that early age, a lot of what I remember is um, other children, okay, being invited on the craft. And this is where it gets real interesting. I was born in 70. My brother was born in 76, 6 years later. Okay, so around, December of 74, by then I would have been 4 years old. And so I was already, he hadn't shown up for a couple of years yet, so to speak. But at the age of 4 or 5, there are certain people, human or alien alike, who in many ways are put in charge of watching over a certain group of children. Maybe they give attention to one more than the others, but
on board the craft, or
yeah, okay. It's like a school you go to type thing. So I had always, when those memories flooded back to me at 21 and started rolling back, and I was trying to put the pieces together as to how old would I have been for certain things. I remember at my first recollection at the age of 5 is a taller, I'm 5 years old, so anything looks taller than me, right, at that age. Yeah. So a girl who was taller than me with long dark hair, who we were paired up with each other, like she was in charge of watching over me. And eventually, when my brother came along, him too. But as the years went on, we had experiences together as we got older. When I finally met this person in real life was at the opening reception for the series of artwork we were talking about before. And she came to see the artwork, and we shook hands, and there was a spark there of recognition. I said, hi, I'm Rick, and her name was Linda. Well, that started a whole thing from there of us not only just recognizing each other, but comparing notes. The point I'm making is that that dark-haired girl who, to my best knowledge, would have been about 11 years old, is the person I ended up marrying. That's my wife.
Wow. So she was on board the craft regularly when you were taken, when you were around that age, and
yeah.
and you weren't on like an equal playing field. Like she wasn't just another abductee like you. She was almost given some responsibility. And in what way? Like what specifically, in terms of the particulars, what was she doing?
Around that age, she was getting to that time frame of initiation into the sisterhood, which is interesting in itself because in one particular experience, she was taken into a large circular amphitheater or auditorium, okay, stadium seating, but circular, theater seating. And I could only see a little bit because I wasn't allowed in. So I could just see what was through the crack in the door. But the crone had taken Linda in for that initiation. Now, all I saw when the doors were open enough was that there was this beam of blue light coming down into the center of that whole congregation. And I think there was a being that was standing there in that bluish light. And there was a whole lot of different alien beings in that auditorium or that amphitheater.
And it was like a circular, I think you described in another
Yeah.
podcast, like almost like a coliseum. There was
theater seating, stadium seating, but in circular, with aisles that you could walk down each row to get to it. And then one of the other, I guess one of the other aliens saw me peeking. They motioned to the crone. The crone turned around and said, "Wait outside," and proceeded to shut the door. So that's what my wife was involved with. She was also being trained to fly the craft. So she became very adept at, just by holding her hands over the control panel, to fly the ship. So that was something else she was trained on too.
She was flying it through her consciousness, or she would put her hands on a control. There was a control panel, or
yeah, it was like this control panel, but laying a little more flat on a bit of an angle where you could see all the symbols or controls. It was flat paneled. There were no buttons, but as she would describe it, she would hold her hands over it and use telepathy to control it.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
I had an experience where they had me flying a craft as well. And I realized at that moment, I was probably in my young 30s. And I realized that it was my consciousness that was definitely flying it. And I started to pull myself out of whatever alpha state or beta state, whatever state I needed to be in. And the craft started to almost, seems like it was going to crash. And so I told myself, that's when I realized it was my mind doing it. And I said, I've got to get myself back into that. And I did. And it was a smooth ride. So they were training me for that too. Interesting.
Why do you think, real quick, before we get back into your story, why do you think that, because you hear this again and again, abductees or contactees talking about, being trained or being shown how to pilot the craft. I mean, it seems strange that they would need extra pilots, to fly their ships. And it doesn't seem like the abductees, as far as I'm aware, are ever, routinely doing this or are given responsibility over flying during a mission or something like that, or at least not that I'm aware of. Why do you think that's going on? Or does your wife have any thoughts on why she was trained?
So if you're going to start bringing people into the awareness of a larger community that exists beyond the fringes of your own global society, you're going to start training them in ways that expands their minds. So we're not talking about learning how to build an A-bomb here, okay? We're talking about learning how to interact with it psychologically, emotionally. One of the biggest problems that this coincides with something that's been reported over and over, but one of the biggest problems is that in the military, when we try to reverse engineer something, we can only take it so far. We don't really fully get it because the military mind will never get it. Okay. There's a, how would you call it? Like a biorhythm frequency aspect of it that you have to change your whole mindset to interact with the ship the right way. It's not, it's not like, how would I say, any kind of technology we have today, like a handgun that you can only fire if it matches your fingerprint or something like that. But when you evolve into the right mindset and you're not looking for ways to turn it into a particle beam laser that can blow a country to kingdom come, okay, then you enter a whole different world of quote unquote technology that now starts to become in balance with that psycho-spiritual experience. Okay. Which then gets into the whole concept of what really are these ships they're coming in? Are they physical or are they semi-physical? Are they dipping in and out of reality? There's plenty of evidence out there that's been caught on film to suggest that some of them can go from the shape of a teardrop to the shape of a disc to the shape of a football. And it's like, okay, what are they transwarping into, for lack of a better term? When they're doing that, are they still in our third dimension, or are they skipping out just to the side adjacent to it and then coming back in the form that they take? You see that with larger ships where you see portions of the ship suddenly appear in the sky, and you're like, that doesn't look human made, but I can't make out what it really is because a segment of it fell into our reality. And then they caught that. That's that oops moment, like, oh, they see us, bring the tail end of the ship back in. So,
Oh, so
like
you think that is definitely happening, that sometimes when we're seeing unidentified flying objects, we're only seeing a portion of a larger ship, and the rest of it's obscured.
Yeah, I think a lot of that coincides with the physical experience people had with the Phoenix lights, where all they saw was that perfect configuration of lights, and yet at other times, the full shape of the ship, triangular as it was, phased in. And this is when people were shooting up high-powered flashlights and actually catching the bottom of the hull of the ship and seeing it. And then other times people would say, no, all we saw were the lights. And they were there close enough to see, even in the dark, a physical form, but all they saw were the lights. So you had these two different parallel experiences happening, eyewitness testimonies, and I think all of them are right. I think some of the people just saw the lights in perfect formation because they were attached to a physical object, and I think other people saw the physical object. That also goes back to the idea of training people to fly crafts, learn how to use the control panel, because you have, each and every one of us has a frequency in our mind, in our brain, to pick up on things, and not everybody picks up on the same thing. A prime example would be, let's say you have 20 people at a backyard barbecue, and they all look up in the sky, in the same point in the sky, and there's an object up there of strange origin. It's not a plane, not a helicopter, not a hot air balloon. It's nothing. It's not a drone. It's definitely something of a foreign nature, exotic nature, alien nature. They all look up to that point in the sky. Someone says, look, you see it? Half of those people, 10 of them, can't see anything. The other 10 see it. Frequency. And then out of that 10, 5 of them can describe what it actually looked like, and they may see another smaller object coming out the bottom of that craft, but the other 5 can't. Out of those 5 that saw the craft come out of the bottom of the larger craft, 2 or 3 of them eventually will find out that they had direct contact, like they were brought on board, or they had a contact experience or an abduction experience or something. Once again, frequency. So that's always an excellent example as to how the human mind is affected, maybe not necessarily from the outside, but from the inside, because of our inability to get past all of our institutionalized thinking and social conditioning. And I have a feeling that in that example, the other 10 people who saw nothing would have seen it as well. It's just a matter of tuning into the dial in your mind. You tune the dial to one part of the bandwidth, you get vampires and werewolves. You tune it to another dial, you get aliens and UFOs. You tune it again, you get ghosts and apparitions. It's all, where are you tuning into? Okay. What is your perception of the matrix you're in? And how are you making that matrix appear around you, there's another aspect of the training program, making people take responsibility for what's in their own mind, instead of blaming it on external sources, because we don't want to take responsibility for the power of the human mind. That's what got us in trouble a long time ago. You see this, and not to throw it off, but just as a side note, you see lessons like this come up in what I described in one of the books as the invisible college. So by example, you take alien technology and you hand it to a human mind that was not strong enough or prepared enough or trained the right way to handle it, and you end up with a monster. Prime example of that would be the movie Forbidden Planet. That is a classic to this day, where the mad scientist,
1950s sci-fi movie. Okay, yeah.
Leslie Nielsen, Robbie the Robot, yeah. Where the mad scientist, he goes crazy because he gained access to an ancient race of beings, the Krell, okay? And he would put the headset on and it would start expanding his mind. But there was a backlash to that because he had a very immature human mind, even though he was a genius. He couldn't account for what was coming out when he went to sleep. And what was coming out was the monsters of the id that went off and killed everybody else.
Yeah.
That's the problem with introducing alien technology to an untrained mind. You end up with a mixed bag of tricks. And with the amount of damage, okay, with the amount of damaged merchandise walking around on this planet on two legs, it's no wonder that they're very cautious about who they pick to actually learn these things. It was no different back in the day with the Egyptian temples. They did not let the Greeks come in because the Greeks did not have the right mindset to handle it. They were more warlike. They wouldn't have comprehended it the right way. So the Egyptians kept them at arm's length because the knowledge that the Egyptians had came directly from ancient aliens. And they weren't about to let the Greeks find out how to manipulate that technology, because that would have ended the world right there. So it's things like that that ripple through time. That's why there was such a collective, concerted effort during the time of the Cold War. The benevolent factions worked double time to turn the clock back on that, because we were within minutes of the doomsday, on the doomsday clock. And someone started whispering in the ear of Reagan and Gorbachev, and that changed the whole narrative. Okay, and that was the extraterrestrial influence right there. Like, we can't afford to have them blow themselves to smithereens. Okay, let's, it's not their choice. Let's give them a second chance. The days of Nazi Germany, same thing. They were getting way too close to harnessing alien technology in a destructive way to take over the whole planet. And the benevolent factions were like, we got to step in and stop this. This is going in a very bad way. So you'll see throughout history where decisions have been made, who's going to have access to learn the right way and who's going to get cut off because they refuse to learn the right way. So a lot of that tends to answer your question as well. When you look at the long play of history right up to the present, you start realizing why certain people are being trained in certain ways to interact with their technology. So you don't end up with a mad scientist who's inadvertently killing everybody off with the monsters coming out of his sleep.
Let's go back to the subject of the mantid. Was the crone, the mantid that you had interactions with, was she a representative of a larger group of other mantid beings?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And can you tell us, let's go into what you were able to glean from your interactions about them and what they're doing, who they are, and their purpose for interacting with humanity.
So there's a group out there called a very active group called the Sisterhood, or in more proper terms, the Sisters of Mercy, but they're just known as the Sisterhood. Okay, they're a combination of the closest you could describe them as far as appearance, how they dress, how they look, is if you took the Dora Milaje from Black Panther and combined them with the Bene Gesserit from Dune. Okay, put that together, you'll have a pretty good image of what they're like. They are a multi-genotype group, all different races, including human. Okay.
Earth human or greater human?
I'm sorry, what?
When you say including human, do you mean Earth human, or do you mean, because there's I think a
Yes,
greater
Earth human as well. Yes. I dare say what we refer to loosely as Homo sapien today isn't the only human being walking around on the planet. So, but yes, from Earth. Okay. So it's not like their structure, their social structure. It's not like they have a commanding leader who hands down rules, but the crone has been their figurehead for quite a long time. So if you're looking for a leader, you might call the crone leader per se. But she has other members of the sisterhood that are just as old as her. I mean, she's like so old, human mind couldn't comprehend it, like the bones of the universe. Okay. But they are essentially the midwives between the galactic community and planets like ours, Earth, seeking out those gifted children to make sure that they don't get used and abused by the wrong side of the equation. So they become very protective. They seek out those children. They train them. That's another aspect of the training program, is to find these gifted children and raise them in the manner to be constructive and productive with their abilities, instead of being trained to be the next Antichrist or something like that. You see this going all the way back to the Christ stories, that whole thing as to why Jesus disappeared for so many years. Yeah, there's a whole reason for that. It coincides with what I'm talking about here. When you start looking at the that lost aspect of history, the Jewish community has that lost history. They always have. And that's where you end up filling in the gaps as to what happened. But the thing that the sisterhood is most aggressive about is making sure that what I describe in the book as the Shetu regime doesn't get their hands on these children and turn them into an abomination. So, which, if you look through history, you can probably pick them out. Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Idi Amin, the ones that they couldn't rescue. So this is what's going on in that respect.
You're saying that Joseph Stalin, Hitler were special children that were co-opted?
If you watch the movie with John Cusack about that whole time frame before he took over, it's quite enlightening as Hitler? To where he started out.
You're referring to Hitler?
I can't. What was it? I'm sorry.
You're referring to Hitler?
Yes. You look back at the story of what happened prior to him being absorbed into that whole thing. There was a Jewish art dealer that tried to take him under his wing and keep him away from that bad element. Strangely enough, that Jewish art dealer was also a veteran of World War I. Okay. So, and he saw this young artist creating this whole world in drawings and on canvas, and he tried getting him to focus and funnel it in that. Obviously, we know how history went. It didn't quite work out, but yeah, they were gifted children. Joseph Stalin, he had the ability to look at you like he was looking right through you, as if he was reading your mind. Okay. So there's many other examples of that. Those were just a couple there to think about, but those are examples of what happens when it's a runaway train. Okay. And then something of a more serious nature needs to be done to stop it.
So the group, though, the primary function of the group is to locate or tend to these children. That
right.
What would you say is the defining thing about these children? That they have psychic capacities, or that they're more connected in some kind of way, or what would be the main thing?
That would be part of it, but it's not the only thing. It's like since they're hypersensitive to the world around them, everything, the sound of color, light, and things like that we take for granted with our normal senses, they pick up on all that, and it's exaggerated. Plus, they pick up on all of the informational input happening in our environment around us that we miss out on. You know, if there's a million things happening in our environment at any given time, most of that we just miss out on. We don't even pay attention to it. We don't pick up on it. Out of that, it might whittle down to about 10,000 things that we're aware of in our environment. And out of that, we may only pay attention to 150 to 200 if we're lucky. So you want to talk about reality. Most of us are missing out on a whole lot that's going on around us. Things that can, to put it poetically, walk between the raindrops. And yet these children can see that with no problem. There's also the added benefit that when you're young like that, you have heightened alpha waves that are more receptive to the stuff we've kind of classified in a kind of like a joking manner as, oh, it's leprechauns, it's fairies, it's elves. Okay, we've relegated that to fairy tales. Well, it stands to reason that the fairy tales were all influenced by this kind of contact as well, by children who could see them, but in their own culture, they had to try and figure out through their own syntax, their own vocabulary, how to describe what they were seeing. So this gets handed down through the generations again. Once again, telephone game comes into play. One person repeats it to another. It changes along the way, okay, to the point where it turns out to what we hear today. But if you take it more seriously and you start going backwards to figure out where the source of that legend or myth came from, you're going to be quite astounded what you find out, that this other influence had been there all along. I would put fairies and Sasquatch and ancient aliens all on the same level. They've always been there watching over us. And they also pick up on who the gifted children are too. So that's why a lot of these fairy tales center around children communicating with these entities, because they have the mindset that's fresh and young, hasn't been contaminated. A child is open to the world in a way that we forget quite fast up to about the age of 13. And then after 13, we start being trained to see this dividing line between what's reality and what's childish fantasy. Mm-hmm. And you should be mature. You have to grow up. Stop being a child, stop buying into these stupid things and these fairy tales and all that and these dumb little stories. So just by institutionalized thinking and social conditioning, we shut down. And then our reality becomes that much smaller. We lose the ability to interact with all those other sensory inputs around us. And we just become very immediate. Horse blinders. This is what's in front of me. I got to go to my job today. I got to pay the bills today. And yes, those things are important, but they're also designed in a certain way that is intentionally counterproductive to the human experience.
You mentioned the Sasquatch are also looking for these children. Our co-host tonight, Kathleen, if I'm not wrong, right, Kathleen, you've had some interesting interactions with the Sasquatch that lead one to think that you've been selected. You might be one of those children.
I honestly feel like I have one as a guide. The first one I saw was 4 years old in Alaska, and he and I made eye contact. He was about 10 feet outside the door, and I was a little girl sitting at the table playing. And the door had it would open at the top, and the bottom was closed, but I could see it was no screen, just the door was open. And so whatever time of the year the cherries were happening in Alaska would be the time. But I was 4 years old, and I saw him, and he was about 10 feet out, and we made eye contact. He was eating the cherries, and he smiled at me. And I don't care what anybody says, he smiled at me, and I didn't see anything but a man bear. And I was running out the door to go give him a hug, because I love animals, always have. And my father caught me midway, just a couple feet out the door, and grabbed me literally by the seat of the pants and pulled me in. But on craft, that same Sasquatch has been on board twice that I know of, the same one. So I feel like, especially since I met a family of 5 just a year ago in Brooksville, Florida.
Oh,
and
wow.
had telepathy, and had telepathy with the mother, and she hiked with me, and she introduced me to her family. It was just an amazing experience. But I think, like I said, I feel like I might have one as a guide in some way. I know the brown, reddish brown one that I saw when I was a little girl has been in my life.
Yeah.
And now I've met a whole family of them. And I'm getting ready to make that the last chapter of my book when I get to it.
Oh, awesome. Kathleen, I was wondering, have you crossed paths with Sue Walker and Reverend White Otter?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I don't know them personally. I have them on Facebook, and I follow their work. Yeah.
So,
The Ponte, they work with the Ponte, I believe. Yes.
Right. And my wife is a cousin to Sue Walker, because on our mom's side, the last name Walker traces back to a certain point that they're like, we have to be related. That's the only thing that makes sense. So, but her book, Inviting ET, that's one, but she also gets into talking to the Sasquatch as well. She actually does paintings, renditions of them, aside from doing the Ponte. But I think that's pretty wild that you're having those experiences there. Something else you may have crossed paths with that I think you'll find very interesting, since you're working towards the conclusion of your book. Did you ever cross paths with all of the, I guess the paranormal experiences that went on, like a vortex on the Bradshaw Ranch? Did you ever come across that? It's it's in Sedona. It's in that area.
I haven't been there. I haven't been to Arizona except to drive through, and but I watch it on TV and stuff. But I have had all of the dimensions opened for me briefly by an angelic lady, a being that appeared to me when I was, again, 4 years old in Alaska. And by having her open these dimensions, I saw beings of every kind, shape, and color, little people that I couldn't get over. I thought they were so amazing, these little tiny human adult beings that were so little, Sasquatch beings. And I always tell people there are flying monkeys, that's true. And the grays, of course. But so I think that they showed me that open all the dimension experience so that I would not have fear when I come in contact with these different beings. And I have actually come in contact with almost all of those beings at some point in my life, including one mantis being who I understood psychically or telepathically that she was called the Ancient One.
Yeah.
And like as if she was forever. I didn't understand. I was young on that experience, but they told me she was the Ancient One.
They are the Ancient Ones, because there's they're out there, but there's not very many of them. So they are part of
It
a
was
much
a
more
female
intimate.
as well.
Yeah.
It was a female, and yeah. So
How
Oh, that's
ancient
awesome.
are they? Like going back to our, they were responsible or in part for our origins, or ancient in the sense of they were there at the beginning of the birth of our observable universe, or do you know? Or
It's kind of hard to answer that question because as new scientific evidence comes to light, the original logic was that if we were able to train our telescopes on the outer edge of our own universe, we expected to find younger solar systems, younger aspects of the universe, okay, younger galaxies, I should say. And contradictory to that, they started finding sections way out there that were older than where we are. And that
fully
kind of,
formed galaxies.
yeah, turned it upside down as to what's really going on. And I guess it went back to that idea of our perception of reality around us. So when you're trying to figure out, I just tell people, pick a number out of thin air that you can't relate to and just go with that as far as how old some of these beings are. So that's, I mean, there's a whole lot of history in this universe that we will never know about. And if we did, it would probably blow our minds because our human mind can only take on so much. I mean, we can't relate to a million years ago. We can't relate to a billion years ago. So nowadays, the younger generation, you mentioned something from 5 or 10 years ago, and they think that's ancient history. So it's all a matter of perception. But yeah, they are quite old. I really wouldn't know what to tell you as far as placing them in some kind of chronological order there.
Yeah. How vast do you think is their range of influence, or their range of operations? Do we even know that, or do we have any clue as to, are they in, is this same group, your group that you're talking about, the Sisters of Mercy, are they just operating in this galaxy? Are any of these groups, that we're interacting with, I wonder how far-reaching their influences are. Are they involved with other planets and other galaxies? I mean, it seems like
I
we get
never,
very information, on that.
I never saw it myself, but they get around in the better part of our galaxy. However, they have also, I've heard the Kron and other members of the Sisterhood talk about the Andromedan galaxy, like they have others over there, so to speak, which kind of blew my mind because you're dealing with technologies that can cover light years within, a couple months. So whatever that technology is that has broken through the fabric of time and space to shorten those perceived distances, that's pretty much, it opens up the door to saying, yeah, it seems like they have influences in Andromeda as well, but I haven't seen them actually do that, so I can only tell you what I've overheard.
Yeah. Do they have grays that, or beings that have the gray type morphology, let's say? Do they have these type beings that are in service and helping them with their procedures and so forth? Have you witnessed any grays yourself?
Yes, you will. As far as the Sisterhood in particular goes, you will find a multitude of different extraterrestrial species right alongside human beings. Um, so human beings from elsewhere, human beings from Earth. Okay. And so it's a wide range of what you find in the sisterhood. And you will even find some male members too, but the predominant thing is that female element, because they are proponents of the vril power, the female principle. Okay. Most people have a preconceived notion of what the vril power is actually referring to, but
You're saying the vril power, the VRIL power.
right.
Okay.
Vril is actually where we got the word, the mispronunciation, will from. So vril power turns into willpower over time through mispronunciation. And vril, you go back in time, equates to another equally powerful word, alkim, which was the power of moving mountains, building pyramids, things like that. So alkim, vril, these are one and the same. But it tends to lean towards the female principle, okay, as far as being able to control that power the right way. Power, technology, fill in the blank yourself, telekinesis, okay, however you want to look at it. That's so as far as going back to your original question, though, yes, there are many different, endless number of races you could find in the sisterhood. Greys, what we loosely refer to as the Greys, you'll see those different kind of species in there, which there's a number of different species that, from our perspective, we call them all the Greys. But, I tell people, look, time's going to come where you're going to have to lay out a scorecard and get used to who each of them are, instead of just categorizing them all with that brand. And I would say to someone, pretend that you're taken out of your home environment and just suddenly dropped right in the middle of Southeast Asia. How would you be able to tell one Asian person from another? They're all vastly different. Hong Kong is not the same as China proper, which is not the same as Japan, which is not the same as Korea or Thailand. Okay. So you wouldn't know. You'd look at all of them as being the same, but if you spend some time with them, a year or so, you're able to pick them out of a crowd at that point. You're able to tell the difference because you get to know them. This is where we need to start learning these nuances and differences there. So a lot of these trainings with the sisterhood, or these experiences, even if it's not training, is also getting people used to seeing these different species and saying, hey, no, the Ponti is not a gray, the Zeta Reticuli, not a gray. Okay. In fact, that term itself, I went so far as to nail it down in my book to basically move it away from the actual living, breathing beings that are out there that have a soul or a spirit, because I define the grays in a very narrow way in the book, just to make sure that you see them over here, and then here's everybody else. Okay. And I define the grays as cybernetic organisms, basically walking supercomputers on two legs, who are operating for the opposing team. So I'm very particular about that, because when I bring it up, there's people who get incensed about that. Well, that's not the experience I had. Well, then you didn't meet the grays, period. You met somebody else. But since you haven't been trained to know the difference, you're just conditioned to call them grays because you don't know any better. So once people start realizing, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So you think predominantly beings that possess the gray type morphology, the slender bodies with the large heads and black almond-shaped eyes, predominantly those are species that are working against human interest, but there are other species, correct, that have that very similar same morphology that aren't.
No, I'm saying even within that xenotype, most of them are good. but then you have this other very select group, which I would refer to as the Greys. So
You call them the Greys, but you don't call these other species the Greys.
no. And there's actually videos you can watch of experts who had been since the 60s, 70s in the CIA, in the military, who are whistleblowers who talk about these different species they all look like they have the same xenotype, same body form, until you line them up next to each other and like, oh, they are different. Now I see the difference. Yeah. So, but if you're having those isolated individual experiences, then I can't really fault anyone for just canvassing all of them as, oh, the Greys. Well, yeah, because you don't know any better, So it's a learning experience that we're moving into with official first contact. Because the last thing you want is to start an intergalactic war by insulting somebody. All right. It's as funny as it is. That was the whole lesson that Tim Burton was trying to teach us in Mars Attacks. Some simpleton thought, oh, the dove is the universal symbol of peace. That started a war. Okay, so yeah, we got to be very careful about what we assume, because what we assume has been brainwashed into us by contrived politics and beliefs that have nothing to do with the reality of what's out there. That's going to be our biggest hurdle, is putting away childish things. Okay, I mean, we're so busy labeling what children see as fairy tales. Maybe we should look at some of our beliefs as adults as fairy tales, and then we'd know what it feels like.
Yeah. So we have about 10 more minutes. What's another experience, notable experience, that you have that you could share in that time? Either with the mantids or go on.
I suppose the experiences that I've had have also manifested in the hybrid children phenomena. Once again, those gifted children, right? When I met Linda at the gallery opening all those years ago, she was married to somebody else, and she was very pregnant, like at the tail end of the pregnancy. In that first meeting, I saw her, and my initial reaction was, I need to get to know her. Somehow I know her. And I couldn't take my eyes off of her. And I looked at her being very pregnant. I'm a single guy. I'm 25, right? Not married myself, never had kids, but I look at her and immediately I'm looking at her being pregnant. And the first thing that came to mind, which in a very bizarre way felt natural to say, I said, that's mine. And then I caught myself. I was like, what the hell? What am I saying? Why would I even think that? So
yeah.
As time went on, we realized, Linda had twins. Okay. And one of them stayed with them and the other one stayed with her. And of course, that's our daughter. Now she's all grown up now and she just got married too. And she has a whole life of her own. She's a nurse. But when you look at the synchronicity of it, what kind of a nurse is she? She's a NICU nurse. She deals with all those little tiny preemies that need help coming into this world or they're going to die. And I have a strong feeling the reason she ultimately, in the backdrop of everything, gravitated towards that is because some of those little tiny ones that she's helping to move along and keep alive are those special children coming into the world. And who knows what that generation is going to be 20 years from now. And it would not shock me to find out, in the grand scheme of things, when you talk about the language of the universe being synchronicity, that those little tiny, tiny babies that she's helping to come into this world and get to the point of being at a point where they can go with their parents and go home and be raised that way. It wouldn't surprise me if that's that generation that's going to be the first to come face to face with official first contact. So if there's anything to think about, it's that. Why did our star child, our daughter, end up going into that profession? Okay. And I think there's something to that when you look at the grand scheme of things as to why she gravitated towards the NICU unit. So.
Right. Yeah. I would think so too. I'm going to see if we can't, to close out here, possibly bring up your website and look at some of your art
Sure.
and the drawings.
If
I can figure out.
Yeah, definitely. If people want to know
go ahead.
more about Linda and I, they can go to our official site is ufoteacher.com, or one word, ufoteacher, okay, .com. You'll see in the menu, there's our about section with our bios. You can read more about us there. There's a link there for our books, our events, our upcoming events. So yeah, there's a bunch of information on there that people can take a look at. And of course, if they want to get in touch with us for any reason, the contact link is right there too at the top, easy to find in the menu. And they can always contact us that way.
Are you able to see my screen, Richard and Kathleen?
I see it coming up with the dots. Yeah.
Okay. Your website is ufoteacher.com, right?
Yes.
Okay. Should come up. Don't know why it's...
if you have some kind of an ad being thrown up in front of you, just close it out.
Yeah, I don't see an ad. It's just thinking. Sorry.
So let's see here. I'll test it myself just to make sure it's not making a liar of me. Okay, yeah, it came up right away.
Okay, it is coming.
Okay.
It is coming up slowly. Okay, we've got it now.
There you go. I'll put it in
here
for people.
Sorry, Richard, say again.
I was trying to put it into the chat here, but it says it failed to post. So I'll let you guys do it.
Okay. Should we maybe look at the gallery?
Yeah, you can go to the gallery. Is that where
you have the drawing you've done? Okay.
I have the artwork there.
I don't know why it's being... Okay. It's being really slow, but
I wonder
hopefully we can get to it.
I wonder if the bandwidth is getting eaten up tonight. So
possibly.
So as you scroll down, the images are filling in, and you'll see the artwork listed there, segment by segment, each group. As I did them, I broke them down into separate groups. So people could basically see the path I was following right to the end. But if they want to see it, they can just go to ufoteacher.com and click on the gallery link at the top, and they'll be able to rotate through the images there too.
Okay, yeah, they might have to go to the website themselves. I'm stuck at this confirm that you're not a robot screen, and I'm checking the box, but it's not getting me in.
Yeah, because the website's coming up right away, so I don't know what's blocking it. I see. Thank you, Simply Heidi. Someone said here, wow, they're amazing.
Okay, good. So they found it. Well, I'm not getting anywhere on my end, so I'm gonna
That's okay.
stop
I
sharing
understand.
this.
It happens. Technology can be difficult on UFO shows. That's been my experience. So,
Yeah, for sure. So Kathleen, did you have any burning questions before we close out?
I would love to meet your wife since she can fly a craft and I can too. I would love to talk
definitely,
with
definitely. Yeah, I'm sure she.
Other than that, I would like to comment real briefly on the grays. I had one gray that was always with me on craft that did not feel like he was a machine, but he had
Right.
always had three little guys behind him that were very robotic. And I knew even from a young age that they were some sort of robots, that they were different. They didn't have emotion. And then there was also some others that, again, I guess even I thought they were all grays, but I thought like different species of grays. So I've seen real tall ones, thin ones, lots of them. I've seen lots of
Right.
them, but I have one that's been with me on craft every time and given me messages quite a few times. So, but I call him a gray. I don't know. I don't have a name. I just know he's very familiar, and he was one that I saw when I was 4. Again, right. So
I'm going to find that video from that CIA operative. You'll recognize his name once you see it. It's just not coming to mind right now. And I'll send it to you guys so you can see what he was outlining as far as even back in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, what they were coming in contact with on a regular basis in multiples, okay, as far as all these various species. And it's quite interesting the way he systematically goes through and describes what each one is capable of doing. And this carries through to, I know we got a couple minutes left. This carries through to what's coming to light in congressional UAP hearings, because once again, our big problem is running into that military mindset, running into that paranoid mindset. Oh, we can't control this. Something's more powerful than the U.S. military. Something has always been more powerful than any military. Okay, get used to it. And that attitude that we're rubbing up against now with the intelligence community, playing it close to the chest and basically telling Congress to go drop dead. That's a breakaway civilization right there that we need to contend with and rein them in. So that's going to be a big challenge.
Well, they told me in 2016 that I was going to be an ambassador to help bring unity between mankind and ET of whatever dimension. I look at it as not out in the galaxy. I look at it as in the dimensions, because that's what I experienced so young. So I look at it differently than some others. But
I'll read something to you here that I think everybody should know. And I put it on the homepage of the site.
Thank you.
I say, if this is the only thing you read today, remember this: you are not broken and you are encoded. Okay. Your life, your lineage is a cosmic message waiting to be remembered. The experiences you've had, the anomalies you've questioned, and the patterns that won't leave you alone are not accidents. They're activation points. You are here not to witness the disclosure, but to be disclosure from the ground up. When you reclaim your story, because this is your narrative out there, don't let anybody else control that narrative. When you reclaim your story, your sovereignty, and your soul's truth, you shift the narrative and the entire timeline of this world. So I just wanted to point that out, that we are disclosure, and that's going to be the surfboard that we use to glide right into official first contact as the next phase.
I'm excited. They've showed me a few little glimpses of our future, and once we get past a few years, I think it's going to be fabulous, and I'm ready. I'm so ready.
It's going to be an exciting time, and
It is.
my wife and I hope we live long enough to see it all come about.
Same here. Same here. I'm 74 and holding on. So, I want to see it. I want to experience it. I do.
But
Well, thank you, Richard, for. I should say thank you, Richard, for coming on. Yeah, it's been a really, really interesting conversation. I wish we had more time, and yeah, maybe we'll have to bring you back on. I feel like you're a wealth of information on the subject, and I feel like there's not as many videos out there with you on YouTube as there should be. And yeah, I think we'll have to do this again sometime.
Awesome.
And thank you, Kat.
Definitely.
Okay, great. Yeah, we will set that up. And thanks, Kathleen, for coming on as co-host. And yes, I guess
inviting me. It was quite a blessing. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Can't wait to read the books and look your site over.
Okay, thank you. You guys have a good night.
And thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And we're live every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And yep, this has been Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. And yeah, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. And you can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.